Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this Reimagine Main Street event, a conversation with the White House about vaccines and the new paid leave tax credit. For closed captions, please watch this on live stream at facebook.com/public-private strategies. With that, it's my pleasure to turn the conversation over to Tammy Halevi with Reimagine Main Street.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tammy Halevi with Public-Private Strategies, where I lead our Reimagine Main Street initiative. Reimagine Main Street is a multi-stakeholder, cross-sector initiative focused on ensuring an equitable recovery for small businesses and the people who work for them on main streets and MLK boulevards in every community across the country. On behalf of our entire team and our presenting partners from business organizations across the United States, welcome. This briefing is part of our national campaign to empower small business owners to become vaccine leaders. We all know that vaccines are critical for Main Street to get back to business, and small business owners in communities across the country are stepping up. Today, you will learn about what the Biden-Harris administration is doing to promote vaccinations and the new paid leave tax credit that will offset the cost for small employers to give their employees time off to get the shot or recover from any side effects of the vaccination. We would like to thank our many presenting partners for engaging and inviting their network of businesses across the country, including the Health Action Alliance, Invest Atlanta, Prosperity Now, the U.S. Black Chamber, the Hispanic Chamber, and AAPI chambers of commerce from across the country. Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. First, please note this briefing is being recorded. After the briefing, we'll send you a link to the recording, and it will also be available on our website, imaginemainstreet.org. It is now my distinct pleasure to welcome Mas Torito, the owner of Coroco Restaurants in Denver, Colorado. Mas is an incredible and resilient entrepreneur. He's actively engaged in ensuring his employees get vaccinated so that he can get back to business. Mas, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, thank you so much, Tammy, for the introduction. Yeah, my name is Mas. I'm with Coroco Restaurants, my family's business. We've been open over 35 years here in Denver, Colorado, and we are so incredibly fortunate that we have a number of employees that have been with us for over 30 years, and this year has been an incredibly hard year. Sales down, cost of doing business going up. It's been tough, but we know vaccines are the way in which we get our feet back on solid ground and how we move forward. So as a business leader, it's so important that we do our part to get restaurants, employees vaccinated, so that way we can get our customers back inside the restaurant and get back to business. And that's why I want to introduce Andy to you. Understanding what the administration is doing and helping business owners like me to navigate the mechanics of the tax credit is critical. I'm pleased to introduce our first special guest, Andy Slavitt. Andy Slavitt currently serves as Senior Advisor to the White House COVID-19 response team. He is a trusted voice among Americans on healthcare and has a long and impressive track record of leading some of the most important improvements to the U.S. healthcare system over his career to date. Prior to his current role, Slavitt founded and chaired United States of Care, a nonpartisan nonprofit dedicated to ensuring all Americans have access to quality, affordable healthcare. Slavitt's decades of healthcare experience in government and the private sector, including serving as acting administrator to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services from 2015 to 2017. Now let me welcome Andy Slavitt.
Thank you, Mas, and thank you all for being with us today and for inviting me to come speak with you. It really is great to be with you. Today is a call to action in a very pivotal part of our pandemic. And we need you as business leaders and community leaders to be with us side by side. The country is at what I think would be considered to be an envious point in the development of this pandemic from where we were a year ago. We longed to be where we are now, a place where we are in position to end the pandemic. In perhaps one of the greatest feats of medical science, multiple vaccines have been developed with near perfect records in both protecting people from COVID and in doing so safely. Scientists tell me that this is as near a hit on a target as they may have ever seen. Why? It comes from nearly 2 decades of innovation, American ingenuity, and funding. No partisanship, no politics, just the private and public sectors investing together in research and development. Where we stand today is 80% of seniors have had their first vaccination shot. If we can come close to that with working age Americans, we will be back to normal in record fashion. This is where you come in. Less than half of working age Americans so far have begun the vaccination process. But the good news is that the vast majority are not opposed. They say they will get vaccinated, but 3 important things will influence them. They need it to be easier. They want to get their basic questions answered. And the more people they know who are vaccinated in their workplace and in their families, the more they are likely to do it themselves. So employers play a critical role in all 3 of those things. Not in coercing people, but by doing 3 things, and this is the call to action. Number 1, making it clear that vaccinations are a priority by letting people know where to get vaccinated, that you support vaccinations, and ensuring that there is a reliable place to get their questions answered. You can also assist with signups or transportation or whatever else is needed for your workforce. Second, strongly consider providing incentives to employees. 30% of those who aren't sure they'll get vaccinated have said that if they have an incentive from their employer, they will likely do it. Okay, what does this mean? This could mean paid time off from work for both getting the vaccine and if someone is feeling under the weather from the vaccine. This week, the president has called on all businesses to do this. But it can also include other things that you feel appropriate for your workforce, gift cards, or any other creative incentives. We have data from some employers which have shown that they've seen a 50% increase in vaccinations by offering seemingly quite small incentives. So please, we ask you as we launch this to consider this. And third, of course, if you have fewer than 500 employees, take advantage of the tax credit, which is about to be outlined for you. This tax credit allows you to get reimbursed for giving paid time off to employees for both getting vaccinated and in case they feel mild side effects or feeling somewhat under the weather, to give them paid time off for that. We obviously don't want anybody to have to lose pay or choose between the pay that they receive and their health. These vaccines are free. These vaccines are safe. These vaccines are highly effective. So I want to thank you because doing this will mean creating an energy and enthusiasm about this. But the prize is so valuable if we are successful. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague at Treasury Department, who will just make sure you understand how these tax credits actually work. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Andy, and thank you to Reimagine Main Street. This is such an important time to be talking, and we really want to emphasize that the American Rescue Plan put in place these tax credits that allow businesses and employees to give off that Andy was just talking about. And it's not going to come out of the business's bottom line. This is going to be a tax credit that fully reimburses a business for the paid time off that they give employees to go get vaccinated. So under the American Red Plan, any small or mid-sized employer, and that's a business with 500 or fewer employees, paid off to its employees to get vaccinated and turn around and get that back in the form of tax credits from the federal government. The amount an employer receive under this tax credit is up to $500 per day per employee. So if you have wages that you're paying to your employee that are less than $500 a day per employee, you're going to be able to get a full tax credit for that amount. And it includes not only the wages that you're paying, the amount you can claim, but it also includes certain healthcare expenses that you might be covering for your employees. And it includes as an employer, it includes your share of most of the payroll taxes that go along with those wages. So it's particularly meant to would be paying an employee to take a day off to get vaccinated. This credit is available if you provide paid leave to full-time employees. It's also available if you provide paid leave to part-time employees. Those categories are covered. Again, it's a really good tax incentive. While I think the expectation is that an employer might give a day off to an employee to get a shot, or if you're talking 2 shots, might give a day off for each shot employee is getting. This actually is available for up to 80 hours during the period April through September of this year. So you could offer up to 80 to any COVID-associated reasons and still be getting tax at time. Day off. We're really thinking about this. With that 80-hour potential tax credit, you're talking about an amount up to over $5,000 per employee as tax credit in the period April and September of this year. So again, this is the American Rescue Plan that the administration actually intended to make vaccines a priority and making sure that we're pulling down any barriers to vaccination by allowing businesses to not come out of pocket for the paid time off that they're giving employees who are getting vaccinated. Now, I know as businesses, there are probably specific questions you have about how one claims this credit. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Helen Morrison, who's going to talk a little bit about how you actually get this credit that we've been talking about.
Thanks, Tom. And yes, of course, that would be the critical question for businesses who are providing aid to their employees. How do they claim the credit? So first, let me say that this is a credit. The paid leave credit is a credit against employment tax, specifically the employer's share of Medicare tax. The consequence, the employer would claim the credit on a quarterly basis when they file the Form 941, or if you have a payroll provider, when that payroll provider files the 941 on your behalf. However, there are 2 absolutely important aspects of the credit. It's referred to as a refundable, advanceable credit. So what do I mean by that? Refundable means that if the credit amount exceeds the employer's share of the Medicare tax, the employer is entitled to a refund of the full amount of the credit. So it is not limited, although it is a credit against the employer's share of the Medicare tax, it is not limited by the Medicare tax. It's advanceable. And what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is that in anticipation of receiving the credit, to reduce or eliminate its deposits, its employment tax deposits, and by that I mean the federal income tax withholding, Social Security tax, or Medicare tax in an amount equal to the credit amount that is anticipated to be received when the quarterly 941 is filed. In addition, if the deposits, the employment tax deposits, are not sufficient to provide the full amount of the employer may file the form 7200 to payment of the credit. So the credit is designed to provide the employer with a full reimbursement of the paid leave up to the limits that Tom indicated, and also to provide the credit in advance of the filing of the 941. So at that, Tom, I think I was going to turn it back to you for any final comment about the credit, and there may actually be some additional questions.
Yeah, thank you, Helen. So the absolutely critical takeaway that you should keep in mind from what Helen just said is that this credit is extra powerful in that this is cash flow on a quarterly basis for your small businesses. We know that there have been lots of struggles over the past year. We know that we are rounding the corner here, as Andy was talking about. And so this tax credit from the American Rescue Plan for vaccinations is something that you can see. You don't have to wait until the end of the year when you file your taxes for next year. You can every quarter as businesses, I know you're filing your payroll taxes, you're withholding your payroll taxes. Well, what you can do by taking advantage of this credit is keep that money that you have right now. And in fact, if you have paid more paid leave time than you actually have deposits right now, you can apply to the government, and in a few weeks, you're going to get that excess money back. So this is a really powerful tool and a really powerful incentive to do something that, we all know is a good outcome anyway for health purposes in terms of getting folks vaccinated. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say. I know that there have been some incoming questions about the paid leave credit. And I think, we're going to throw it back to the panel to address some of those. But I would say, in addition to vaccinations, this credit is available if you're giving your employees paid time off because they're experiencing, if they have COVID or they're experiencing COVID symptoms, it's also available for that. There are other categories for which this credit can be taken, but it's really in the American Rescue Plan where this credit was extended and expanded to cover vaccinations, and the amount of the credit was increased. So I'll turn it back to Andy and the rest of the panel here. If we want to take some questions, I leave it up to Tammy.
So thank you, Tom and Helen and Andy, both for being here and for that thoughtful explanation. We have so many questions. We have a little bit of time, so we'll jump right in. Quite a few people, including Aaron Ezekiel, have asked about the applicability of the tax credit for self-employed individuals, barbershops, hair salons, solo practitioners. Can you speak to whether and how a sole proprietor can take advantage of this tax credit?
Tom, do you want me to take that?
Sure, they can take it, but Helen can explain it.
Well, and Tom can jump in. And I did see a number of questions that we should answer, but let me first answer this one. It is available for self-employed or sole proprietors. Of course, those individuals don't file a 941. It would be filed on their income tax return, but the equivalent credit is available for a sole proprietor or self-employed.
It's great, super important given the number of sole proprietors and self-employed people. There's a question from Christine Ippolito about whether you can use the tax credit in tandem with PPP money, the Restaurant Recovery Act money, other relief programs. Can you talk about the interplay between the tax credit and other relief programs?
Yes, I should have mentioned that at the top of our comments, or my comments in particular. The credit is available even if the small employer claimed a PPP loan. However, the same wages cannot be utilized to support the forgiveness of the PPP loan as they are for the paid leave credit, but it is still available.
A couple of questions related to how this tax credit is similar or different and follows the same rules as the FFCRA previously published by DOL. Over to you all to explain where that's the same or different.
Well, maybe, Tom, if you want to take this, I'll just comment by saying it's a continuation of the FFCRA, but the American Rescue Plan expanded the period of time for which the credit is available, and it did specifically add the availability for the credit for receiving a vaccine or to recover if you're under the weather for getting the vaccine. So the credit for purposes of paid time off for the vaccine does apply for wages that are paid leave from April through September, but it is a continuation. And if there were sick leave that was taken prior to April 1, in accordance with the FFCRA, the employer could go back, mend their 941, and receive a refund and by claiming the credit.
The only thing I'd add to that is that the 80-hour availability does reset as of April 1st of this year. So even if you were paying your employees for sick leave last year and taking a credit, you have a new 80 hours that you can provide and claim this credit for April through September of 2021.
Thanks. The next question is for you, Andy. It's a two-parter. The first is this a voluntary act for employers or mandatory? And what role do you think employers have to play in helping end the health crisis?
Yes. Well, thank you for the question. It is, of course, voluntary, as it should be, and which is why. But I think the second part of the question is really a pivotal part of this, which is it's going to take all of us to end this pandemic. It's going to take government doing its part, scientists, doctors, nurses, people giving vaccines doing their part. And now is the time, I think, when attention really most focuses on employers. We have, over the first 2 months of this campaign for vaccination, we went into every nursing home in the country and vaccinated the vast majority of people in those nursing homes. That was a critical point of focus. And we then vaccinated many people over 65. Death rates among people over 65 have dropped by over 80%. So the vaccines work. That was a critical focal point for our effort. And all the attention, as it should have, focused on those folks because they were most at risk. Now what we're seeing is that most of the hospitalizations are coming from people who are younger. The people who are over 65 are not getting hospitalized as much, but people who have historically thought that they were safe from this virus are in a position where they're not as safe as they thought they were, where we have variants that have become more contagious, that are in different parts of the country. And as they get there, as it has recently in Michigan, and as it gets to other parts of the country, younger people are not going to be safe. They're not going to be safe. Not going to be as safe as they think they will be. So this is where I think you can do the things that we talked about: educate, inform, and encourage people to get vaccinated. Remove those barriers. Give them incentives that are appropriate for you. And then, of course, you can take advantage of this tax credit by giving people the paid time off that they need. And while it's voluntary, I can't think of a reason not to at this point.
Thank you. So there are a lot of questions. For those whose questions are not going to get answered live in real time, they will be passed to the team at Treasury in the White House so that they are aware. I think we have time for two last questions. The first is a tactical, practical. What documentation is needed to claim the credit? And the second is, do nonprofits and churches and other organizations of that nature who employ people qualify for the credit?
Well, I'll take the second part and throw the harder question to Helen. The second part: nonprofits, churches, employers with fewer than 500 employees qualify. So nonprofits absolutely qualify for this credit.
On the question about documentation, first of all, the credit is claimed by the employment tax return. If you are an employer, self-employed, as said, would be through the filing of their income tax return. And under the FFCRA, the Department of Labor and others indicated that you should bring the reasons that you are providing the paid leave and retain those records, in the event that you were asked to provide them if audited by the IRS. But the principal, way of claiming the credit is through the filing of the employment tax filing, the Form 941, or other filing for, self-employed or others who don't file the 941.
Thank you. Thank you all very much for the questions. invite Andy to share the group.
Yeah, my words of inspiration are, it's so good to be so close to the end. Yet I learned never to quit until the job was done. And I also say that, as a country, there's no way to defeat this without each of us doing our part. It has been hard. It's been hard to see our business. It's been hard to see the impacts. Of course, really, I'm in this pandemic when you guys are actually in the driver's seat, when you are in a position where you can do the most good. I think is an exciting place to be, and I have every confidence because every employer that I talk to, every one of you that I hear from, tells me the same thing. How can I help? What can I do to help? How do I help this country? How do I help my community? How do I help my employees? And that does mean coming a little bit out of your comfort zone from the normal traditional role you might play with your employees. And we're not asking you to be invasive. We're not asking you to invade your employees' privacy, but we are suggesting that what you do and how you help will matter to them. And being active on this will help not only your employees, but their families and the community get vaccinated. I don't want to paint the picture of what the world looks like if we don't succeed at getting working age Americans to get vaccinated, because I'm quite confident we will. But I will say we don't want to live with this any longer than we have to for all of our sakes. So I thank you a great deal from the White House, from the president, from the vice president, but also just from the country, from all walks of life. This is the least political thing you could be asked to do. It's the least political thing that we've ever worked on here, and probably the most impact. So thank you again.
I know everyone will join me in thanking you, Andy, Tom, Helen, for taking the time today, but more importantly, for the critically important work you're doing to get the country back to business. I'd also like to thank all of our presenting partners, and most importantly, those of you who are on the line. You can become a small business vaccine leader. There's a campaign, and we would encourage you to visit reimaginemainstreet.org, take the pledge to access simple tools and resources for you and your business in multiple languages. And with that, thank you again for participating, and thank you for all that you do to make Main Streets robust and dynamic and good.
Thank you for joining us. This is now the end of the event. You can disconnect.